What's it like for you, such a long military career, knowing that this chapter is coming to a close?
Well, I've had no time to focus on anything else but the job, to tell the truth, George, and it seems like we've packed in more into our schedule to do and things we want to get done in the last sort of couple of months or so than we had before, and we had packed in a lot before. So no problem focusing on the job. This is real life stuff that we deal with truthfully, and therefore I keep my focus very much on making sure that we look after the things that are important, the lives of our young men and women in uniform.
I want to come back and talk about that because their lives are very much at risk, you know, certainly around the world. We talked about in the bio was you at 8 years old. Did you actually try to enlist at 8? Did you think about it?
Actually, I did. I wrote off to a recruiting center. I was reading military history. Wanted to be a soldier. Wasn't quite sure why, but I wanted to be a soldier. I wrote to a recruiting center. They actually wrote back and tried to recruit me, and I think that speaks of our standards that we had at the time. We're looking at 8-year-old kids. Yeah, I did. But, you know, George, I was just looking at the bio here. I got to tell you, the one thing out of what you showed there that sticks out in my memory as I went to welcome a group of our soldiers returning home from Afghanistan, and you see those young soldiers coming down the ramp of the aircraft, and they're so glad to get back to Canada. They get off and quite literally want to kiss the ground that they land up on. They want to kiss the ground of Canada. And one of the soldiers had said he was going to kiss the first person that he saw when he got off the aircraft. And there I was at the bottom of the stairs. And so he said, "Fuck her up, sir." And I did. That was part of my job as Chief of Defense Staff, I thought.
God, well, if it was the American, it'd be like, don't ask, don't tell. You just like, give me a kiss, buddy, and whatever.
I kissed on all those soldiers.
But that's the very personal side of this. And I wondered if that's the part of this you're going to miss, not being a soldier.
Absolutely. You know, I'm not going to miss being Chief of Defense Staff. That's not the issue whatsoever. I'm going to miss being a soldier. I've been a soldier now for 35 years. I grew up in the Army because I joined very young, and my wife and I got married young, and we grew up in the Army, and it's been part of our life completely, and that part I will miss, and it's the camaraderie. It's those incredible young Canadians that I get the opportunity to work with, to represent, to soldier with, and they are phenomenal.
Did you have somebody in your family when you were a kid telling war stories that kind of got you hooked?
Well, actually, telling war stories about a great uncle, Uncle John Clark, I heard about from the time I could remember. He was killed in World War I, and all I heard about was Uncle John Clark. He was killed. He was buried in Dozinam Military Cemetery in Belgium, and nobody had ever seen his grave. So in 1998, I happened to be in Europe. I had a day off, and I drove up to Belgium and visited his grave, and it was probably one of the most emotional things I've ever done. 1917, he had just turned 20 years old, and there was his grave, John Clark.
Young.
It was.
And you see these soldiers now?
I was in Passchendaele a week ago and went through Tyncott Military Cemetery, and there are about 4,000 Canadian graves there. And you look at the ages on all of them, and they're all young. 18 years old, 20 years old, 19 years old. Quite incredible to watch.
I mean, the wars of any nation are built off the backs of the youth.
And we do live on the youth. I mean, this is a rigorous profession, physically, mentally, and if you're not young, you can't handle it, truthfully. And that's why it's time for old fogies like me to go.
You know, there's a lot of talk. Was this 100% your decision, or was there any way, were there people in the Prime Minister's office or elsewhere kind of nudging you, saying, listen, Rick, it's time?
Nobody nudged me. In fact, great support from the Prime Minister, and who had talked to me about extending significantly, etc. My wife and I made this decision over a longer period of time. Truly, we started about 18 months ago, defining what the conditions were that would say, now it's time to go. Last 6 months or so, we worked at that. And the last 2 or 3 months, we started to put the check marks in the boxes that we had set. You know, do we know what's going to happen in the mission in Afghanistan post-February 09? Do we have the work for the defense plan laid out? Do we have the support of Canadians? And do we have certain things in place? And truly, in March, all that came to fruition, and then I made my decision.
In your mind, it's yes to all those things?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, indeed. And what I saw was that we're actually transitioning to a new phase in the Canadian Forces. Last 3 to 4 years, we've been trying to recover. We've been trying to rebuild the confidence in ourselves. We've been trying to rebuild the pride in soldiers and sailors and airmen and airwomen, trying to get equipment, get dollars, get support.
Was that challenging?
Oh, my goodness, of course it was, because we had really had to do a cultural shift to start with. We had to go out and, as we call it, recruit a nation, get Canadians to actually realize they had an Army, Navy, Air Force in the Canadian Forces, their sons and daughters serving, and to actually have an understanding of what they do, appreciate what they do, and then actually support them. And that support has been phenomenal in helping change what we've had to go through this last 3.5 years.
You're in a complicated place right now because nobody wouldn't support the troops, obviously, but supporting the mission is a much different thing, isn't it?
And that's fair ball. You know, that's the great thing about a democratic society. We don't ask them to support a mission. That's their own decision to make. We believe as soldiers that what we're doing is absolutely right. And if you go into a place like Afghanistan, you see a country devastated, a population with nothing, and they're being pressed by those extremists who bring violence to bear, and they have no sort of assistance except for us to keep that violence away. So we believe in it, but that Canadians make their own decisions, and truly, what we spend our life in uniform is to actually have a democratic system, to protect the democratic system, which allows them to do that.
Take me inside the mind of a soldier, and I guess you specifically, personally, the idea of a soldier has to do the job that they're asked to do, but I wonder what it's like if a soldier doesn't believe in a job, and I don't mean specifically Afghanistan, I just mean in general. If a soldier doesn't, does a soldier have to believe in the mission themselves for them to be an effective soldier?
Well, I think yes in almost all cases, occasionally perhaps no, but I think yes, and I think actually the missions that we've undertaken on behalf of Canada, all of our soldiers, all of our sailors and airmen and airwomen, because they're all there, believe in those missions. But at the end of the day, you do sign up to serve Canada, and you sign up to serve Canada with unlimited liability, and that means at times you may put your life at risk in order to do your job, to do your mission, whether you believe in it or not. But truthfully, I've never yet met a soldier, a sailor, an airman or airwoman who didn't believe in the mission that they had, whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's search and rescue missions here in Canada, maritime patrol, aerospace control, doesn't matter.
Afghanistan being the big conversation for a lot of people when it relates to our military. What's the one thing that Afghanistan and the situation have taught you about yourself as a person and as a soldier?
Well, I think it's just allowed me to re-believe or to have a confidence again in our profession as a soldier in Canada.
Was that waiting for you at a time?
Oh my goodness, of course it was. I think for everybody in uniform, and you know, those of us who went through the decade in the 90s, particularly when morale was lower than whale's poop and things were tough.
Pretty low, dude. Pretty low.
And I remember somebody saying to my wife one day in 1994 that, you know, anybody who wears a uniform or associates with somebody wearing a uniform should be ashamed to come out in the streets today. And I remember thinking about, you know,
was
I'm
that
not sure I wanted
something?
to stay here. Yeah, it was tied to the Somalia debacle and the pictures on the front page of the paper that day, etc. And we all, a lot of people left. Those who stayed, I think, all made a sort of firm commitment, never again. Canadians, this is your armed forces. We're your sons and daughters. If you like us, support us. If you don't, get engaged and change us. But you don't have sort of the liberty, so to speak, to stand back and just throw rocks at us.
You've had a decent working relationship with Prime Minister Steven Harper.
In fact, excellent working relationship.
What was it like, the difference between dealing with Mr. Harper and dealing with Mr. Paul Martin?
Well, two different individuals, obviously, and different personalities and how they would sort of engage people. But, you know, of course, Mr. Martin was the Prime Minister who appointed me, so a solid relationship there to start with. Had to build a relationship with Mr. Harper, but that wasn't difficult either, and good working relationships with both Prime Ministers.
What are you going to do? Are you going to run for office?
No, I'm not.
No?
No, I'm not. You know, I see politicians, our political leaders around the country, we don't treat them very well, and I wonder why anybody would impose that on themselves, you know, on themselves or their families, and that's unfair because, my goodness, I see some great folks. Not going to do that.
No politics for you?
No politics for me.
I hear there's an opening for the Leafs. They need a GM.
I've offered a significant number of times, but I've not heard yet from Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment.
Can we show a picture? We got a picture of him. Wait a second.
But I'll put the general and general manager is what I've offered to do.
How about that one there? How do you sell that to the Leafs organization?
You know, something, as I said, when I puckered up to kiss that soldier coming off the plane, you do certain things for your country when you're the chief of defense staff. In this case, I was wearing the Montreal Canadiens hockey sweater. Ray-Jean Houle, that great hockey player and gentleman, presented that to me when we were in Kandahar together last year, and I put it on, obviously, because he did it.
He was a GM for a while, too.
Great guy.
Good to see you.
General
Hillier, real pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for always being doing. General Hillier, always still to come tonight.